Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Take on Trenton podcast here at NJBIA. My name is Chrissy Butis, and I'm the Chief Government Affairs Officer at the association, and I'm joined by my colleague, Mike Wallace, Vice President of Government Affairs. Mike handles all of our employment, labor, workforce development, and federal affairs over at the State House, and it goes without saying he's been quite busy recently. I'm sure many of you are reading in the newspapers and via all of our communications about the several labor mandate bills that are currently pending before the legislature that have given us a lot of concern. And we were hoping to talk to you about them today a little bit, about some of the impact and how you can reach out and get more information from Mike. So why don't we jump right into it? So Mike, it's been very busy lately at the legislature. We're currently in our lame duck session, and for those who aren't familiar, that's a time period between Election Day and when the new legislature assumes office, and that'll take place around mid-January. So essentially, any piece of legislation that isn't signed or taken action by the governor will essentially have to be reintroduced in that mid-January timeframe. And so with that being said, we have several bills that have caused the business community a lot of concern. And I wanted to jump right into it and start with the independent contractor legislation. This legislation would essentially put into law any penalties and certain provisions that would make it illegal for someone to operate as an independent contractor. And I was hoping that you might be able to elaborate a little bit on what the bill does and why we're concerned with it and what we've been able to achieve thus far in terms of advocating against some of the provisions of this bill.
Yeah, absolutely, Chrissy. And thank you for having me on and to discussing these very important issues to the business community. So the independent contractor bill, there has been a couple different iterations of this bill since it's been introduced in early November. But essentially what the bill will do is codify. So there's some discrepancy on what the intention of the bill is and what the bill would actually do. So the stated intention is to codify the current regulations, current unemployment insurance law, and current case law in regards to the ABC test, which is a test that workers must satisfy in order to be determined to be an independent contractor. This is a very strict test, and it differs from worker to worker, and it's a case-by-case basis, and the commissioner has the ultimate authority to determine whether or not a worker is an independent contractor. Part of the issue is that this not only is the bill codifying the regulations, case law, and current unemployment insurance law, but it's also codifying the way the commissioner is interpreting those laws and regulations. So that's where our concern is. The concern is different depending on what type of worker you are. We know that there are more workers now who want the flexibility to be able to work when and where they want, and employers are hiring workers in that way. So the bill right now has passed in both the Assembly Labor Committee and the Senate Labor Committee. It was referred to the Senate Budget Committee in the Senate and referred to the Assembly Appropriations Committee. Although we were expecting this bill to move quickly, which it has not been posted yet for a vote in the Assembly Appropriations Committee, which is meeting tomorrow. It hasn't been posted on the Assembly board list, and that board list came out yesterday. So we're hopeful we have slowed this legislation up so we can continue the conversations around what that ABC test should really look like.
Well, Thank you, Mike. That's a great overview of all the work that you've been doing and explains the difference between where the legislation started and also where it stands today. I know you've testified several times in opposition to this bill, and I think it's important for all of our members to know that if you believe you would be impacted by this legislation, if you are an independent contractor or if you are a company that utilizes independent contractors, that this legislation could in fact impact you. And so I would encourage you to reach out to Mike directly. His email is mwallace@njbia.org, and we want to hear from you on this legislation. As Mike said, it is something that is currently being debated in the legislature, and so it's really important to have and hear from our members on what that impact would be, and Mike would be more than happy to walk you through the legislation. So, Mike, just going further, another piece of legislation that's being considered right now is something that we commonly refer to as the WARN Act, and so I was hoping that you could give our members a little bit of an overview about the bill. Again, I know this is a bill that you have been working with sponsors on to get several amendments to. You've been testifying in opposition. However, we're able to secure those amendments. And I wanted to make sure that our members were aware of some of the implications of that legislation should it get signed into law.
Yeah, so the WARN Act is actually in current law. And currently employers with more than 100 employees that are going to have mass layoffs, which right now include, I believe, 100 employees, would need to notify the Department of Labor that their intentions of having these layoffs. This proposed bill, would change the number, the threshold that triggers the notification, so that employers with more than 100 employees that are now going to be laying off 50 or more versus today it's 100 or more. So it's going to lower the threshold. In the current law, those employees would be have to be located in one location. In the proposed bill, those employees could be in different locations throughout the state. And it's for full-time and part-time employees. In the proposed bill, it also requires these employers to pay severance. Now, currently, that requirement of severance packet of severance to these laid-off workers only applies if that employer provides or doesn't provide the advanced notification. In this proposed bill, whether or not the employer if the employer does not provide the advance notice, there's an additional 4 weeks added to this proposed bill. So there'll be a mandatory severance included in this proposed bill, which is our primary concern with the bill. It lowers the threshold needed to trigger the notification, and it expands that notification from 60 days to 90 days. So we're looking, we've worked with the Senate sponsor. We've been working with him since, I believe, May or June of this year on this bill. We were able to receive some substantial amendments to this bill. There were provisions that would have impacted a change in ownership of these types of employers, and which would have required these new owners to keep all of the prior employees in place. So we were able to get a lot of some substantial amendments made to the bill. We're still in talks with both sponsors of the bill, the Senate and the Assembly sponsor. They are willing. Or they've indicated that they're willing to either do some cleanup, a cleanup bill. We're trying to push to get some amendments done now in lame duck if they're going to move this. So yeah, these we're still working with them, and hopefully we can get it done.
Yeah. And Mike, I'm glad to hear that you were able to secure several amendments on that legislation, and also working with the sponsors of the bill. It's always good to have that open communication with them and to understand the concerns of the business community. So thank you for that. To our membership, if you believe that this would impact you, once again, I would encourage you to contact Mike directly, and he can again fill you in on how this might impact your particular company. And then lastly, Mike, I know there is another piece of legislation that has been before the Senate Labor Committee, and that deals with increasing penalties for misclassification.
Yes.
And so we wanted to make sure our membership is informed about this particular bill, and I was hoping that you could fill us in a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so essentially this bill would enhance the penalties for employers who misclassify their workers to provide between $200 and $1,000 monetary penalty. So currently, if a employer misclassifies their worker, that employee is subject to a penalty of $500 to $1,000 and could be sentenced to 10 to 90 days in jail. So this new bill proposal would enhance that monetary penalty from $200 to $1,000. We have testified twice on this bill, once in the Senate Labor Committee, once in the Assembly Labor Committee. We are outright opposed to this legislation. We think it's excessive to add to the already substantial penalties that are in law in regards to misclassifying your workers.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike. So to our membership, these were just three of the top pieces of legislation that are pending in the labor committees that NJBIA has been opposed to, and again, working with the sponsors of the legislation. And we want to hear from you if you believe any of these bills would impact you and your company. And again, you can contact Mike directly. He handles all of our labor advocacy, and there has been a very, very big effort to push some of these pieces of legislation. So I hope that we were able to give you an overview of what is going on related to labor legislation during this lame duck period. And as I mentioned to you, I want to have our membership reach out to us and see if they have any additional questions. But just rest assured, we are certainly, and Mike is there day in and day out advocating on behalf of the business community. So we thank you for watching today, and feel free to contact either Mike or myself at any point in time. Thank you.